is Friday. It is Friday. Man, this week went quick. The news cycle's been loaded with things that I couldn't wait to talk about. Obviously, some I was sad to talk about, some I was mad to talk about. And today there's going to be some stuff that I can't wait and I'm very happy to talk about. But we got to keep bringing facts and context and a little bit of reality to the shooting situation in Minnesota and where we are right now in Minneapolis and the situation that we're looking at. And I want to address something today concerning that shooting that we didn't touch on purposefully yesterday, which is the consequences for this shooter. Is that a possibility for this person to face consequences? Will they be held responsible legally in any way, civilly, in any way? And we'll talk about that. It's appropriate now to get to that because I felt like we focused appropriately on who this person was and what happened to her and the knee-jerk battle lines reactions from this administration directly after, with no evidence, no investigation yet, grainy film, little to go on. They had no problem coming out very strongly, bigly, and quickly about this young woman being a domestic terrorist. Before I get into that, I just want to say the Bears this weekend have the biggest game. Look, we're deep in the playoffs now, baby, and it's the Green Bay Packers, and I haven't been this excited in a long, long time about Bears football. Scotty, I don't know what to tell you, bro. Steer clear. I'm going to be toxic. When it comes to this weekend's games. And the Green Bay Packers, they got to come to Chicago. Ed, you better take it easy in my inbox, brother. I'm going to be on one. I'm going to be in sixth gear on Saturday. Sixth gear. What are you looking at, bro? Oh, is that the Super Bowl on replay you put up there? You son of a... Oh, Scotty, how could you? He just put up on a monitor. Oh, I just realized the shot didn't take. Oh, man, Scott, the shot didn't take. I just realized that. So at least on the podcast, you won't. On the podcast, it'll be like, boom, professional. Well done. On YouTube, I'm sorry. Scott put up on the monitor in front of me our Super Bowl loss. I was going to say this is the biggest game since 2006. And that is the result of the 2006 season, our loss. Oh, to Indiana.
I already knew you were going to start the show talking about the Bears, and I just wanted to bring you back down to earth.
Such a smart ass.
I wanted to bring you back down to earth, put on a little Super Bowl loss for you, remind you. And I started it after Devin Hester ran it back for a touchdown.
Yeah, you didn't.
So you didn't get to enjoy that. I enjoyed it, though.
With friends like this, bro, honestly. Are you serious? My Super Bowl loss is playing in front of me as I'm... This guy. No, it's a big game. Ed, you better take it easy. You better take it easy, brother. In Chicago. All right, look. Here we are. The aftermath. The fallout. Okay. Furious demonstrations have taken place in Minnesota, Minneapolis. Tim Walz, he talked about the National Guard. We'll get there. Okay? We'll get there. At least 100 more federal agents are on their way to Minneapolis right now. To what? Cool the situation down? To de-escalate? Is that why you're sending all those federal agents, Trump? Look, Mayor Jacob Frey had a lot to say, and I appreciated his comments. He said more. He said in an interview Thursday that the Trump administration would use any chaos as an opportunity to occupy Minnesota in some form. He is cutting straight through the BS, and he's seeing this for what it is. It's an opportunity for Trump to use our National Guard as his personal army and sit them right on top of the citizens of Minnesota and Minneapolis for a foreseeable future. How's that going for you, D.C.? Remember that little clause in him activating the Guard to your city where it had to be after a 30-day period reevaluated by Congress? We've blown straight past that. This administration will not be constrained by laws and the Constitution. So if they do show up, and I have a feeling they might, it will be for the foreseeable future. And Frey sees it as he sees it. He sees it clearly. He speaks right to it. He also said our community members are not taking the bait. Well, that remains to be seen, Mayor. That remains to be seen. You hope your community will not take the bait. And don't forget about Umbrella Man in the auto zone shows up with an umbrella, even though it's not raining, with a sledgehammer in his hand, busts open an AutoZone window, looting followed. The Minnesota police did an investigation, and they pretty decisively concluded, yeah, he wasn't actually a protester. That was a person on a mission. How many of those will be in attendance to these protests in Minneapolis? Agents of chaos. I don't want you to forget that. I don't want you to forget that incident. Somebody got interviewed in this, a Minnesotan, one that I used to get a chance to talk to at least once a month. At least once a month, I would be running the board, running the audio and the video for Randy, and I would get a call. Brett, tell Randy that I was able to get a nomination with no political campaign funds. It's Jesse Ventura, Brett. It's Jesse. I say, Jesse, I know who you are, bud. It's great to talk to you. And every now and then I'd get to talk to Jesse. One in every 5 conversations, I'd get to somehow steer his manic, expositions to some stuff that I wanted to know about. Because, see, I was a big wrestling fan for a period of my life. I like movies. I like Predator, right? And every now and then I'd get to kind of steer the conversation to something like that and get a little tidbit out of him here or there. Brett, Hulk Hogan was a great man. Don't listen to what the mainstream media says about the Hulkster. He was a great... Every now and then I'd get something good. Well, the media has tracked down Mr. Ventura on the streets of Minneapolis, and he had something to say.
You want to know something? I'll give you a quote. We're a third world country now. You want to know why? I'm an expert. I've been to them. I spent 17 months in Southeast Asia while the draft dodger was playing golf. Right? You know how I know we're a third world country? Because in third world countries, they have the military doing their police work in the cities when you walk around. I was in the Philippines the day Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and went under dictatorship. We went from nobody to a guy with a machine gun on every corner. That's what happens in a dictatorship. In comes the military. That's what's happening here. And people better wake up to it. You want to read something? Then read your history of Germany and start comparing the tactics of what happened in 1930s Germany to what's happening here. Read history. You learn from history. Any time you have the loss of life that needlessly happens, that's tragedy. And what occurred yesterday did not have to happen.
Okay, so he's not mincing words, and he's flexing his broadcasting chops clearly, his acting chops, his dramatic, presentation and oration. He's flexing. It was amazing. It was concise. It was to the point. It was in no uncertain terms. Thank you for that, Jesse Ventura. One time I got him on the phone, Scott. One time I got him on the phone, and I poked, and I came up with gold. I said, Jesse, I saw videos of them building all white camps in the middle of our country. Do you have any thoughts? Do you know what that's for? He said, Brett, let me tell you, if you look at those camps and you look at the barbed wire fences, the barbed wire's pointing in. Do you know what that means, Brett? I said, oh, Jesse, what? They're trying to keep the women and the children in. They're not trying to keep you out. They're trying to keep them in. I'm like, oh, okay. The conspiracy theory, I'm talking 100% USDA approved prime choice out of Jesse every single time. Love that guy. All right. So administration officials, including Trump, defended the shooting as lawful, saying the agent who fired was acting in self-defense. City and state officials, they don't agree. They've described those accounts as, quote, propaganda and, quote, garbage. State officials initially said they would investigate the killing. Now, we covered this. We got to be clear about this, because this is the whole deal going forward with protection for these federal agents. This immunity that's going to come up time and time again, and has already come out of some people's mouths, being unable to hold these federal agents accountable for their actions. This is the ball game in terms of that. State officials said, we're going to investigate the killings. But then Drew Evans, the killing, then Drew Evans, the superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, said on Thursday that the agency had been withdrawn because it had been denied access to evidence. This is the deal. Now, Mike Waltz said at a news conference on Thursday that Minnesota must be part of this investigation. Quote, I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment. He said that some of the federal government statements regarding the circumstances of the shooting have already been verifiably false. He sees it. Frey sees it. Waltz sees this. They are speaking directly to it. He is telling you they are boxing us out because they've already made their decision. But I will take it further because I want this to be very clearly laid out. But let's hear what they have to say. At a news conference in New York City on Thursday, Christine Ohm, Homeland Security Secretary, said that Minnesota and Minneapolis officials have failed to maintain order. They have not been cut out. They don't have any jurisdiction in this investigation. That is patently false. That is an unlawful, unconstitutional statement. That is patently false. She just lies. Boom. No problem, no compunction, just lie. Just lie about it, because they absolutely have jurisdiction over a murder investigation of one of their citizens. Let's be clear about that. Now, Cindy Burnham, a spokeswoman for the FBI office in Minneapolis, who will be in charge of the evidence gathering and all the things that follow an investigation, she declined to comment. It's probably a smart move out of you, Cindy. She declined to comment, okay? But one guy did comment. One guy had something to say. Let's hear from this idiot.
Vice President Vance, you just suggested that this woman who was killed, Renee Good, is part of a broader left-wing network. Who do you think is behind this broader left-wing network?
Well, it's one of the things we're going to have to figure out, but here's the way that I put it. When somebody throws a brick at an ICE agent, or somebody tries to run over an ICE agent, who paid for the brick? And who told protesters to show up and engage in violent activity against our law enforcement officers? You see, just with this most recent terrible incident in Minneapolis, you see friends of this woman's or other people who are eyewitnesses saying basically that she was there to engage in obstruction of a legitimate law enforcement operation. How did she get there? How did she learn about this? There's an entire network, and frankly, some of the media are participating in it, that is trying to incite violence against our law enforcement officers. It's ridiculous, it's preposterous, and part of our investigatory work is getting to the bottom of it. Who's funding it? Who's supporting it? Who's cheerleading it? And of course, if there's illegal activity related to that, we're going to get to the bottom of that and prosecute it where we can.
Our vice president, in the face of this woman's death, is not saying we're going to get to the bottom of what happened that caused this woman's murder or death. We're going to get to the bottom of what that officer saw. We're going to get his phone. We're going to get eyewitness testimony. We're going to collect evidence. We're going to withhold our judgment until we have an investigation underway and we've got some results. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is we're going to get to the bottom of why she was there, because we believe that she was an agitator, an instigator, an actor who pays for the bricks, who tells her to show up. Her grieving wife already told you that she was the one who coerced Renee into going to the scene. We already know why she was there. Her grieving wife told us why she was there, JD.
It's time for a quick break, then we break some more. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. We'll be back to break it all down. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. Now back to Brett Breaks Things, smashing spin, silencing the noise, and keeping it all facts, no fluff.
Okay, before we move forward on can this guy be held accountable, let's talk about this guy for a second. Let's talk about this guy. This guy is Jonathan Ross. And one interesting fact about this Jonathan Ross, although we don't have a ton of details about like who he is as a person, relationships, family members, stuff like that. I don't have a ton on that. I can tell you this: a year ago, he was involved in a traffic stop with a Guatemalan man named Roberto Carlos Munoz Guatemala. He had previously been convicted of sexual abuse. They targeted him. They wanted to stop him. They did. He had been convicted of sexual abuse previously, and he currently was not a citizen. They stopped him to apprehend him. He took off, and he dragged Jonathan Ross about 100 yards with his car. And Ross did suffer some huge gash on his forearm. A bunch of stitches were necessary. And the driver himself, Mr. Roberto Carlos Munoz Guatemala, was apprehended. He has been convicted. He is in custody, and he is awaiting sentencing. But I feel like that's necessary context when you talk about him and possible motivations. Context into why he did what he did. It's important. It's important to know these things. Now, on social media, the protests. Let's finish talking about these protests for just a second, okay? On social media, Pam Bondi warned that protesters in Minnesota not to cross a red line into obstructing, impeding, or attacking federal law enforcement. That's what she said. The Department of Homeland Security defended its work in Minnesota on Thursday, pointing to recent arrests of men who they said were in the country illegally and had been convicted of crimes. Quote, in the face of violent attacks, ICE law enforcement arrests pedophiles, rapists, and drug traffickers in Minneapolis just yesterday. That was from Trish McLaughlin. So they are immediately pivoting once again to the great job they're doing in the area as their officers murder people. So they're just doubling right down on the philosophy. 100 more agents are heading to the area, and they're out here lauding their efforts. All right. And they're telling their base, hey, we're not just shooting women in the face, we're also arresting pedophiles. I don't mean to make light of it, but I mean, their posture is laughable. It's laughably cruel. It's laughably amoral. It's laughably tone deaf. Protests have been occurring for weeks. Over the immigration policy in Minneapolis, by the way. This wasn't an isolated incident. These protests have been happening. They've been going on. There is a huge demonstration that gathered around Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building, which is the home of the ICE headquarters just outside the city. A huge crowd of demonstrators gathered there. The ICE agents and other federal agents hit them with tear gas, and physically pushed them away from the building. Broke that up with tear gas. Of course they did. Demonstrators then regathered last night, raining, dark streets, raining, together, chanting, waving signs. It was pretty impressive. Pretty impressive display of, solidarity and, resolve, and showing this administration simply, we're going to say something about this. We see that people are getting shot. We see the conduct of your federal agents, and we're going to come out and we're going to get in their face and we're going to protest them anyway. It's a brave move. I don't care who you are or what you think. This is a brave move. Even if you agree with the ICE agents, you got to admit that's some chutzpah, considering what just happened, to get right back in their face and get right back to the demonstrating. One organizer in the crowd said yesterday they shot Renee Nicole Good, and today news is coming out of Portland that they shot 2 more people, and that is actually true. Tricia McLaughlin, notable degenerate and spokeswoman for DHS, said the agent's target was an undocumented immigrant and member of Tren de Aragua, the gang with roots in the Venezuelan prison that has been a frequent target of President Trump. That's what Tricia McLaughlin says. They shot at somebody who was a member of Tren de Aragua. They also provided absolutely no evidence to back up that claim that that's who this person was, or that's who this person was, affiliated with. No evidence. That's the MO of this administration. Absolutely no evidence to back up any of their claims. And, the Portland's chief sounded pretty damn salty about it when describing the events. And I want you to hear this, because one thing he said here is really important. Bob Day, the Portland's chief of police, said at an evening news conference that he had no information on the identity of the 2 people that were shot. A man and a woman is all he knew. He said that the federal officials involved in the shooting were no longer on the scene when officers arrived. They just shot him up and left. Not only did they shoot them up and leave, Bob Day informs us that 911 wasn't alerted, medical attention wasn't alerted until the victim of the shooting called them himself. Once again, denying medical attention. And I explained to you yesterday the multiple violations in the ICE agent's actions concerning the medical attention being denied of Renee Nicole Good. And here we go again. And one of those things I said yesterday was that it is the legal obligation for any officer to immediately render medical aid or assistance directly after a shooting if nobody's lives are in danger, period. And here we are again. They shot these two people, a man and a woman, shot them up, accused them of being in a gang, shot them up, and rode away, leaving the victim to call 911. And the chief sounds salty about it. He said local officials knew little about the shooting and that the investigation would be led by the FBI. We do not know if this was an immigration-related event. We do not know which federal agencies were involved at all. They know nothing. They've been told nothing. That's the new federal MO. That's the new federal MO. We don't have a video of it either. That is a big, thank you, Sky. That is a big difference because we can't form any kind of opinion about what happened. We have nothing to go on, and neither do the local police. So all we have to go on is what Kash Patel's FBI tells us. Now, on the protests. On Thursday, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, put the Minnesota National Guard troops on active duty after previously having put them on standby just the day before. He indicated while the troops would be staged and ready to help law enforcement officers, there were no immediate plans to deploy them yet. And he said this. He declared Friday as a day of unity in honor of Miss Good. He encouraged residents to observe a moment of silence and to participate in acts of service. And I just want to tell you this. This shooting happened about a block away from where George Floyd was murdered. This community has been devastated and divided, and it is not going to stop anytime soon. Now, let's get to what you're here for. In terms of this, now, was this legal? Will anybody be held accountable? Well, okay. Christine Holmes says, the ICE officer did exactly what he was taught to do. But the department's own rules for use of force, they contradict a little bit of what she may be saying. They might contradict them. I want you to hear from John Miller. This is pretty damn interesting.
We did this in New York in 1994, 95. We changed it in LAPD when I was there in 2004. But it's basically simple, which is if you're confronted by a moving vehicle that could be a threat to you, get out of the way of the vehicle and don't shoot at a car. Now, this is DHS policy. I'm reading to you from DHS policy. DHS law enforcement officers are prohibited from discharging firearms at the operator of a moving vehicle or other conveyance unless the use of deadly force of the... Basically, it says, unless it's...
This appears to be black and white.
Well, it does. And it also says a law enforcement officer must take into consideration the hazards that may be posed to law enforcement and innocent bystanders by an out-of-control vehicle, which we just saw the result of that. The point is, unless the person is literally either using the vehicle to ram other people in a terrorist attack, or has a car bomb, or is chasing you with the vehicle in particular, getting out of the way and reducing the tactical exigency where you're not creating a situation where you're forced to fire these shots is what most law enforcement agencies have adopted.
And very clear that that's what was there.
It's missing.
Okay. He reiterated a lot of what we said yesterday, but I want to be clear about this, and I want my audience to be clear about this, because I feel like being completely informed on this really arms you to shoot down the bullcrap we're hearing from the right. DHS policy memo from 2018. DHS policy memo from 2018. Law enforcement officers can use deadly force when they have a reasonable belief that the subject of such force poses an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the law enforcement officer or another person. Okay. But deadly force shall not be used solely to prevent the escaping of a fleeing subject, the memo says. They can only use deadly force when somebody in the vehicle has a gun or some other deadly object, or they are clearly trying to ram officers with the car. That's it. Well, I can tell you from what I saw from the video we played on this show just yesterday, I can tell you objectively, reasonably, and without an investigation that A, she was clearly trying to flee having her car door opened by that officer. You want to accuse her of fleeing a scene. You want to accuse her of fleeing a federal officer. That's exactly what she was doing. The federal officers pulled up with their lights blaring. Officers approached her car, grabbed her car door. She turned the wheel and tried to flee. I can see that clearly, reasonably, objectively, without being an investigator for Kash Patel's FBI. I can see that. And I can see, number two, B, whatever, that she clearly did not intend to hit that officer. Not only did she not intend to, she did not. She didn't hit this guy, nor did she intend to. How do I know? Because before she hit the gas to flee having her car door open, she turns her wheel hard. You can see the wheels turn hard away from the officer, and she tries to flee. Tom Homan, DHS officials, they want to tell you, you can't judge this. We got to wait for the investigation. Then we'll really judge this. Whose investigation? Kash Patel's investigation? Well, we don't trust or believe Kash Patel. Sorry. We don't trust or believe Kash Patel. Period. And there is another aspect to this. Okay, there's another aspect to this. Federal law enforcement officers have federal immunity when carrying out their official duties. Federal immunity. They do. But states can and do prosecute federal officials when they break state law. Okay, so let's be clear. You're going to hear people talk about federal immunity. You're going to hear J.D. Vance talk about federal immunity. Let's listen to him.
Thanks for taking my question. So the head of Minnesota's investigations agency says that the U.S. Attorney's Office has essentially cut off the state investigations agency's access to the investigation. What is the precedent for that, and why shouldn't the Minnesota officials on the ground have access and evidence to work on this investigation?
First of all, I wish the state officials in Minnesota would investigate why you have so many people who are using their vehicles and other means to actually interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Walz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after and make this guy's life miserable because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous.
Okay, so here we are. We have to examine, did he do what he was trained to do? Is what he did reasonable? And does he have immunity? Those are the questions on the table. And we will let you know where we stand on all of that. We will let you know where we stand on all of that, and we're going to hear from some legal experts to get some really good context and information on this. We'll be right back.
You're back with Brett Breaks Things, because silence isn't an option.
All right. Immunity. That's what J.D. Vance is talking about. That's what J.D. Vance is talking about in the face of the Minnesota officials, state and local law officers being boxed out of the investigation. Boxed out. Normally, I said states can and do prosecute federal agents, federal officers. They can and they do. But typically that is a collaborative effort when your FBI is run by a competent director and it hasn't been weaponized politically and truth and transparency and justice matter. It's a collaborative effort. When these pillars of our society are not in place, you get things like this. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office determined that the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, should no longer be a part of the investigation. The BCA is no longer allowed to access the scene or the evidence, quote, from the BCA Superintendent Drew Evans. This is from Drew Evans' mouth. We expect the FBI to conduct a thorough and complete investigation and that the full investigative file will be shared with the appropriate prosecutorial authorities at both the state and federal level. Good luck with that. Good luck with that as you try to prosecute one of their own. That's the problem here. Now, let's hear about this immunity from legal experts, okay? This is from Michael J.Z. Mannheimer. He's a constitutional law expert at Northern Kentucky University. We're going to hear from a few law experts real quick. Let's orient ourselves. The idea that a federal agent has absolute immunity for crimes they commit on the job is absolutely ridiculous. Definitive. He said that more than 120 years of case law on the issue of so-called supremacy clause immunity has shown that federal officials can be criminally pursued by state prosecutors for conduct taken in the course of their official duties, but that it's up to the courts to ultimately determine whether they can be shielded from the charges. Now we're going to hear from a guy named Timothy Sini. He is a former federal prosecutor in New York. This is who I want to hear from, and we hear from him a few times. This is great. This is going to orient us. Officers are not entitled to absolute immunity as matter of law. A federal official can be charged with state crimes for actions taken in the course of their position. Now, they could attempt to have this moved to federal court, says Mr. Sini, where they would have then they would be able to then raise their immunity argument. What he's saying is they want it to be a federal case matter, not state. They want to move it to federal. And that makes it much easier when the state can't put together a case because the federal government won't allow them access to evidence or investigation. Do you see how this works? So he's theorizing, Mr. Sini is, that this will end up in a federal court where they could raise the immunity defense. Okay, then two questions are pertinent there. Two questions. One, the judge would have to decide whether the agent was acting in the course of their official duties. That one's a pretty low bar to cross for the lawyers of the defense, for the lawyers that will be representing the federal government in this matter. That's a pretty low bar to cross. They just have to prove that this wasn't personal, basically. Did he do this because he was acting as an ICE officer, not a scorned lover or somebody who was upset with her in some way? Was he acting in official duties? That's a low bar. That's a no-brainer for them. Okay, but the next one is much more complex. It turns on whether the action taken was reasonable. This is the ball game. Even on the immunity defense. If they would like to enjoy the immunity on this, if Officer Ross would like to be immune, his lawyers, the government lawyers, are going to have to prove that his actions were reasonable. It sounds a lot like what happened with the George Floyd killing, right? When he went to trial, the whole thing was what he did reasonable? And the jury found that it was not, and he went to jail, that officer. So that's what it's going to revolve around, okay? And that question is going to take extensive inquiry. It's going to take witness testimony. It's going to take video evidence. It's going to take an investigation. An investigation that's going to be run by Kash Patel. Okay? Sini said this: what is objectively reasonable under the particular circumstances is evaluated from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene and turns on those facts known to the officer at the precise moment. So there it is from Mr. Cini. They are going to determine if this was reasonable from the perspective of a reasonable officer, not a brainwashed stormtrooper who believes the victim was a far-left, violent, terrorist Antifa actor. Here is the cultural divide. Here is the real struggle on what is reality. This might be the problem for Mr. Ross. Is he a reasonable officer? And is that indeed the perspective that was taken at the time? Or was the perspective more from a brainwashed stormtrooper who believed this was a far left activist? A reasonable perspective. That's what it's all going to hinge on for him. Okay? Now, they could also use something else. Like they used on the officers who stood around Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. There was officers who stood around and watched. Remember? They were prosecuted under the deprivation of rights under color of law. Okay? That is a powerful law used by prosecutors. They used it then. They could use it again. Cini talked to this. He spoke to this. He said winning a conviction at trial for that charge would also have an uphill battle. He explained that prosecutors would need to prove that the agent willfully violated the law. It would be very tough. Prosecutors would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was a willful deprivation of the victim's rights. Here, it would be the right to be free from excessive use of force. That one, he's saying, will be tougher. They got it done in the George Floyd case. It'll be tougher here, he's saying. And also, Renee Nicole Good's family could sue civilly. She could. But the legal experts think that also could face an uphill battle. That could also be shielded with the immunity. Might not go anywhere because of the immunity that he may or may not enjoy that J.D. Vance is talking about. Now, I just got to be clear about what's happening here, okay? I want you to be real clear about what's happening here. Officers have federal immunity. The states can prosecute them. But the state is barring, the FBI is barring the state from access to the evidence. Therefore, the states can't really mount a case without evidence if they would like to hold this officer accountable. And if they do try to mount a case, that case will be dependent on what evidence FBI Director Kash Patel decides to give them. Good luck. How will there be any assurance that Kash Patel won't withhold evidence? Just decide not to give them what they need. Or tamper. Yeah, I'm going to say it. What? Kash Patel's not capable of this? Kash Patel's not capable of this? So if the state tries to hold Mr. Ross accountable, any attempts to do so will hinge upon the FBI's cooperation and their forthcoming nature with which they give the evidence, the transparency. I mean, it's right in our face. And I feel like this is something that has been laid out previously. You know, in case of fire, break glass. In case our agents murder somebody, deploy this strategy. We're already on it. We won't let this happen again like what happened to Derek Chauvin. Okay, no more. Trump told you in his campaign that cops will have immunity, that cops will be free to do their jobs. This is what he was talking about. This was a concerted effort. This was a game plan. You want to hold our officers accountable? Well, we're not going to give you the evidence to do it. No investigation, no evidence. You're going to have to rely on us.
Breaking politics, breaking narratives, breaking news. But first, we need a coffee break. Breaking news, breaking rules, breaking through. Back to Brett Breaks Things.
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing. My own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop. And that's law. Very good. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people.
Do you feel your administration needs to abide by international law on the global stage?
Yeah, I do. I do. But it depends what your definition of international law is. You mean in Greenland?
In Greenland we had.
That's because you needed them at the time.
In the 1951 agreement, though, it says the United States can reopen these bases anytime you want. You can send as many troops as you want, and you haven't done it. How come?
Because I want to do it properly.
And properly means own it?
Really, it is. To me, it's ownership. Ownership is very important.
Why is ownership important here?
Because it's what I feel is psychologically needed for success. I think that ownership gives you a thing that you can't do, whether you're talking about a lease or a treaty. Ownership gives you things and elements that you can't get from just signing a document that you can have a base.
Do you see any checks?
Okay. All right. So that's Mr. Trump meeting with the New York Times. And that is what happened just before his phone call with Petro. And that same gaggle was there to get those comments on the shooting. Okay. That's the New York Times sitting down with President Trump, and he had a lot to say. It's not a gaggle. It's just the New York Times. I know. But he had a lot to say. I do want to address what he just said about international law. I do, but he made clear he would be the arbiter when such constraints apply to the United States. It depends what your definition of international law is, unquote. Well, the definition of international law is clearly laid out in NATO, UN, ICC, and ICJ charters. It is very clear. You can go check it out. I don't know for sure that you can read, Mr. President, but somebody can read it and then put it in some big, giant, display with bright colors and simple shapes to explain it to you. But if you want access to the international law that you want to crap on, it's there to be seen. It is not up for interpretation. Whether you do anything in conjunction with it, that obviously that's on you. That's your decision to not. But if you'd like to take a look at it, it's clearly laid out in their charters. You're a moron. He made clear that he uses his reputation for unpredictability and a willingness to resort quickly, bigly to military action, often in service of coercing other nations. That's what he admitted. He cited his successful strikes on Iran's nuclear program. He talked about how he keeps a model of the B-2 used for that bombing on his desk. He bragged about the speed in which he decapitated the Maduro regime. And he bragged about wanting to own Greenland. Okay? Now, he declined to answer directly when asked about NATO. He declined to answer directly, but acknowledged it may be a choice between our wishes and NATO solvency. That may be a choice. If we do this, NATO might dissolve. Yeah, that might be a choice I have to make. He talked about China and Russia. He was dismissive of the idea that the leader of China, Xi Jinping, or President Vladimir Putin of Russia could use similar logic to the detriment of the United States. He denied it. He said in his mind, U.S. power is the determining factor and that previous presidents have been too cautious to make use of it for political supremacy or national profit. Tell me again, MAGA, how he doesn't want to be a dictator. Tell me again how he's not an authoritarian. Tell me again about it. As he talks about political supremacy for national power and national profit, and U.S. power is the determining factor in global political events and occurrences and formation. Tell me again about it. And that reporter, you heard him bring up the 1951 document, the Denmark Defense of Greenland Agreement, which I described to you in detail, which basically allows the U.S. total access to put military bases wherever they like and even come and deal with Greenland themselves to come get those minerals. That doesn't concern Trump. That's not good enough for Trump. An agreement that this country signed into with Denmark isn't good enough for Trump. An agreement that we signed into for the betterment of everybody, that was amended in 2004 to give him even more power to move, troops around as he sees fit. Before the amendment, they had to discuss with Denmark, not so much Greenland, but they had to discuss with Denmark, hey, we're going to put a base here, and we're going to move some troops here. And after the amendment, no, they could just do what they want and then tell Denmark or Greenland or whoever after. Doesn't matter. And they have never said no to any request the United States has ever made. But that's not good enough for Don. That's not good enough for Don. Quote, ownership gives you things and elements that you can't get from just signing a document. Yep. Dominance. Ownership over Greenland will give him dominance and power to tell officials or heads of state exactly what to do with their country. Unfettered, unnegotiated access to all the minerals in Greenland, the palladium, the gallium, the cobalt, all of it. Take all of it. No more deal making. No more cutting profits. We just take it. You see the difference? And of course, ownership will give President Trump and his administration dominance and power to jam our military philosophies and our domestic policies right down the throat of Greenlanders, all 60,000 of them. It's triple the size of Texas, with 60,000 residents. You don't have to have a very big thumb to squash 60,000 residents. That's an easy trick. That's no problem for Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller. That's no problem. They're happy to do it. They're happy to do it. And what about NATO? What about NATO? Quote, I want them to shape up. I think we'll always get along with Europe, but I want them to shape up. I'm the one that got them to spend more on the, more GDP on NATO. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He barely knows what he's talking about. But if you look at NATO, Russia, I can tell you, is not all concerned with any other country but us. Once again, downplaying the importance of NATO. Downplayed the importance of NATO in his national security strategy. Downplays the importance of Europe, multilateralism with Europe, downplays it all over the place, and encourages some nations in NATO, hey, the majority nations, the big players, they don't have your interest in heart. They're not like you. You need a more Trumpian philosophy running your country. Break off. Come see us. We'll win you an election. We'll change your policy. We'll deal make you richer, make you stronger, biglier, quicklier. He's attacking NATO every chance he gets. He added, I've been very loyal to Europe. I've done a good job. If it weren't for me, Russia would have all of Ukraine right now. I don't think so. I can't definitively say he's wrong about that, but I don't think so. I don't think the European, the EU and the major powers in Europe would have allowed Russia to just take it. I think there would have been a fight without us. I think there would have been a fight. I don't know if he's right about that. He could be. Now, this next part, I got to admit, Scotty, this next part I don't mind. And it's, we bring you the truth. We bring you honesty. I'm not an arm of a propaganda entity. I'm not told what to say or what to think. And not everything is black and white. This next bit, I don't mind. He discussed Russian nuclear arms. He said he seemed unconcerned that the last major nuclear arms control agreement with Russia was about to expire, and that's true. The last agreement we made on arms control, nuclear arms control, that is about to expire. and it will leave the world's two largest nuclear powers free to expand their arsenal willy-nilly for the first time in about a half a century. Trump said to that, if it expires, it expires. Wait, we'll just do a better agreement. Insisting that China, which has the fastest growing arsenal, should be incorporated in any future agreement. You probably want to get a couple other players involved also. So if what he's signaling is, A, I plan to rectify this situation, and if he's talking about a better agreement, you know he only means better for him, and therefore better for the United States, hopefully. And if we're talking about nuclear arms control, whatever. You want to talk about, severely limiting the nuclear arms production of Russia, if that's the conversation you want to have, I'm here for that conversation, Mr. Trump. I'm here for that. And if you're talking about, hey, we shouldn't just be talking about a long-term control of nuclear arms production from just Russia and the United States, we should be talking about it in terms of China. If that's what you're saying, Mr. Trump, I'm here for that too. I'm here for that too. Okay? So let's be clear about that. I don't mind those comments. Not at all. Now, there may be some nuance involved in that, some crusty, crunchy underbelly, some dark, dank, cobwebby, disgusting underbelly to his comments. Of course there could be. Until I know them, until I know what they are, those underlying motivations, I can't speak to them. So I'll take it face value for now. What about China, though? What about specifically critics saying your unseating of Maduro is going to open a door to China's efforts to take Taiwan? He was asked by New York Times, do you think you've created a precedent that you might regret, Mr. Trump? He said to that, hey, this was a real threat. You didn't have people pouring into China. Repeating his oft claims, he repeated all the claims about Maduro opening up his prisons and sending all the prisoners and psychopaths to the United States, even though that claim has never, ever been proven. No evidence ever on that claim, just to be clear. But he brought it up again. He added, you didn't have drugs pouring into China. You didn't have all the bad things that we've had. You didn't have the jails of Taiwan opened up and people pouring into China, or criminals and other people pouring into Russia. Okay. The reporter asked him, or the reporter brought up, he said, hey, China sees Taiwan as a separatist threat, a threat to security. He said, well, I can't speak to what Xi might do. That's up to him. What he's going to be doing, that's up to him. But I've expressed to him that I would be very unhappy if he did that. And I don't think he'll do that. I hope he doesn't. And he suggested that the Chinese leader would not dare to take a step in that direction while Mr. Trump was in office. He may do it after we've had, a different president, but I don't think he's going to do it with me as president. Well, that part may be true as well. We're coming back. We're coming back for overtime. Please stay with me. But yeah, that part may be true as well. Xi may well be a little scared of pulling something like that with this psychopath running our country. We're coming back.
It's time for a quick break, then we break some more. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. They'll try to repair the breaking news, breaking rules, breaking through. Back to Brett Breaks Things.
All right. So that New York Times interview took place before he got on the phone with Petro, the president of Colombia, and Petro told him how bigly, quickly, and strongly he was, and we'll see what the fruits of that are. They are planning on meeting at the White House to talk. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with that. I will say this about that nuclear arms comment that he made about getting a better deal. The reason I'm a little encouraged about that is because he could have just as easily had been like, if Russia tries to get more nuclear arms than us, then America will be bigly and we'll get double the arms and bigger warheads to penetrate their defense. the rhetoric could have really jumped up in an area that is obviously very sensitive, and it did not. And I just want to say I do appreciate that, because don't tell me it's not in the realm of possibility that he starts spouting incognitively off the top of his head about a bigly, strongly arms race with Russia or China. It was definitely on the table. He didn't do that. So for that, I'm a little grateful. But what he did do was cry about how the $1 trillion defense budget for 2027 was not enough, and he wanted an extra $500 billion. He said, quote, "This will allow us to build the dream military that we have long been entitled to, and more importantly, that we will keep us safe and us secure regardless of the foe." So while he's telling China better not, he's making our military more bigly, strongly, and quickly. It's not unrelated, okay? It's not something that Beijing or Moscow will not notice. They most definitely will notice that an authoritarian regime in the United States that is publicly threatening their interests in statements and actions across the globe has just increased their military budget by half. That is something they will notice. And you know who else noticed? Pope Leo noticed. I'm going to give you a little statement from Pope Leo, and I'm going to let it sit, and you take it for what it is. Pope Leo tweeted this: "War is back in vogue, and a zeal for war is spreading. The principle established after the Second World War, which prohibited nations from using force to violate the borders of others, has been completely undermined. Peace is no longer sought as a gift and a desirable good in itself. Instead, peace is sought through weapons as a condition for asserting one's own dominance. This gravely threatens the rule of law, which is the foundation of all peaceful civil coexistence. Let the cognitive dissidence descend upon MAGA, who likes to appropriate the Christian religion when defending this administration's actions. Let the cognitive dissidence descend upon them like a fog that is muddling up their thought process as they try to grip with the juxtaposition of their dear cult leader increasing our spending budget, while Pope Leo says this: peace is sought through weapons as a condition for asserting one's own dominance. Let the cognitive dissonance begin. I want you to justify it. I dare you, MAGA, right-wing talking pieces, podcasters, writers, I dare you to attack Pope Leo and this tweet. I dare you. You know who he's talking to, and you know what he's talking about. It's not very veiled. I dare you. Let the mental gymnastics begin. Let the cognitive dissonance descend upon them as they try to, rectify this in their brain, make it okay, make it all fit in the MAGA scheme. Where's Q? Q will help him out. Where's Q? Now, Trump says, and I'm going to move quickly here. Trump says no more violence will be necessary in Venezuela. He talked about a follow-up strike. He talked about follow-up strikes on Venezuela itself, possibly on government apparatuses, portions of the de facto government that has been left. Talked about the possible necessity of this. It all kind of hinged on Delcy Rodriguez's cooperation, right? The de facto leader, the vice president of Maduro, all about her cooperation. Well, she is cooperating, and her underlings are cooperating because he says we won't need violence, just as they release 7 political prisoners that the U.S. has been urging Venezuela to release for years. We're talking about political dissidents, opposition operators and agents, activists, people that were against the Maduro regime and being held and possibly tortured. They got released. 7 of them got released. And right when they got released, Trump posted that. We won't need to strike. We won't need to strike on the Venezuelan government. Boom. And Jorge Rodriguez, the head of Venezuela's National Assembly, said, hey, more is to follow. This is an easy one. What, you want this riffraff in our jail released, and you won't bomb us or land helicopters in our backyard and take us away in chains? Is that what you're asking right now? No problem. Here they are. You want more? Jorge Rodriguez is like, here, take more. Take more. This worked. You're bigly, you're strongly, you're quickly. Take them. You want them? You got them. Please don't unseat us. Please leave us alone. And I think it's interesting to note, when you're talking about Delcy Rodriguez, the de facto leader, the vice president to Maduro, who facilitated all of his oppression, all of his human rights violations, the strong arm that was used against the Venezuelan people for years. She facilitated all of it. She was complicit to all of it. She spoke out against none of it. And she is the one who the Trump administration has decided to work with. The alternative option to working with Delcy Rodriguez would have been working with the opposition leader, the Maduro opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, who, by the entire world's account, and Biden's administration's and the Trump administration's account, successfully elevated Edmundo Gonzalez to president of Venezuela. The whole world agrees that Edmundo Gonzalez, led by Maria Corina Machado, won that election in 2024. But Maria Corina Machado is not the person that the Trump administration decided to work with. You know, the Nobel Peace Prize winning opposition leader, popular with the people, you know, that Maria Corina Machado, they didn't want to work with her. They didn't want to work with her. They wanted to work with the vice president to the dictator, the person who was number 2 in charge of oppressing the Venezuelan people. That's who they wanted to work with. Well, Maria Corina Machado will be visiting Washington next week. Now, she said she's going to dedicate her Peace Prize to Trump then. And he said, quote, that if she offered him the prize, it would be a great honor to accept it. First of all, that's pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic that you would accept somebody else's Peace Prize. The trophy itself is just symbolic. You will have assumed none of the great things that she did to get that prize. It's just a piece of hardware. You are pathetic. You personally, Mr. Trump, have done very, very little to deserve something like that. And for you to not see that and think it's acceptable to take her trophy is absolutely pathetic. But it also signals to Machado, in my mind, just wait. You want to normalize relationships with me? Your relationship with me? You want to be friends? You want to have a dialogue? That's smart. You come to Washington. You have a dialogue with me. You give me your trophy and wait. Because this whole deal with de facto leader Delcy Rodriguez, that could change at any moment. And we may need somebody friendly with the administration to quickly take her place. So although Maria Corina Machado has been silent in the last few days about her being kind of stepped over as de facto leader, she's been silent. She knows how to play the game. Trump is telling her just wait. But there's another reason that Trump is saying no more violence in Venezuela. And I'll tell you right now, and nobody's saying this, but I'll tell you why he's saying it. Because he has that meeting with the heads of oil today. Today, he is meeting with the heads of all the biggest U.S. oil companies. And they have worries and fears and concerns about investing in Venezuela. Again, we've talked about this. And signaling to the world, hey, we won't have to cause any more violence in Venezuela, is a signal to these oil companies ahead of this meeting, hey, some of those fears you have, hey, I'm going to alleviate them. Come talk. Now, before the meeting, Trump suggested that these companies were going to invest at least $100 billion, even though none of them have said that. None of them. He said this before the meeting. Nothing had been worked out. Nothing had been discussed. None of them have, committed to $100 billion or any $1 billion for that matter, or $1 for that matter. Not yet. Yes, Chevron is already in the country. They're kind of a separate case. They're already there. But as far as these other U.S. oil companies, nobody has committed to anything. And it is true that some of the fringier, smaller U.S. oil companies, they would love to get in on this. That's for sure. This would be a huge step up on the global stage for them. This would be a huge, huge, profitable, money-making expedition for the smaller companies. They would love to get on board. They are hoping the major U.S. companies do not get on board so they can be the next major U.S. company. But the big boys like Exxon and Conoco, they're the ones with the deep pockets. They're the ones with the vast expertise. They had been there previously. They're the ones with the crucial experience inside Venezuela. They're the ones that Trump needs. And those companies, specifically ConocoPhillips and Exxon, and this is from 6 people that have knowledge of their conversations, anonymous, of course, because nobody wants to end up, with cinder blocks tied to their feet at the bottom of the Hudson. So, of course, they're anonymous. 6 people have said that these 2 companies, ConocoPhillips and Exxon, have openly, amongst themselves, amongst the top brass of the company, expressed reservations about committing the kind of money that he's talking about, the kind of money it would take to meaningfully boost Venezuelan oil production. What they're talking about, sitting around their board of directors or wherever they have their meetings, that what they're talking about is doubt. Doubt in this venture. That's what the big boys are talking about. They doubt. Now, some of the companies have discussed the possibility of seeking some form of financial guarantee from the federal government before agreeing to establish or expand production in Venezuela. That is from 2 of the sources. I told you. These oil companies aren't coming to meet with Trump. Trump is going to meet with them. They're just going to do it in Trump's backyard. Trump is going to try to convince them. Trump, on one of the rare instances, is going to come with his hat in hand, offering our cash and subsidies for this venture to these companies who have deep pockets. And inside these meetings, that is exactly what they're talking about. We're not even going to really entertain the possibility of committing ourselves to Venezuelan oil production unless we get something for it. And that is exactly what they're talking about. They want to find out what kind of juice they can get from squeezing an orange. That's what they are talking about. Now, experts are saying it's not that these oil companies are adverse to pumping oil in risky places. It's not that. It's that they can't even assess the risk in Venezuela right now. There's no way to even assess it because it's so nebulous. It's so ongoing and morphing and changing day to day, the situation. Quote, this is not an environment where you can make any kind of decisions. That is from Luisa Palacios, a former chairwoman of Citgo. Now, again, Chevron is a little separate discussion because they've been there the whole time. When Chavez made the deals to pump Venezuelan oil untenable, ConocoPhillips and Exxon left. Chevron said, it's tenable for us. We'll stay. And they did. And they've been there the whole time. With their licenses being extended, even while this administration calls Maduro a drug trafficker and sanctions him, still allowing Chevron to do their business in the oil production. Mark Nelson, who is the company's vice chairman, will be at this meeting. Chevron will be there. ConocoPhillips, they declined to comment on the things we're talking about now, but they confirmed their chief executive, their CEO, Ryan Lance, will be there. Exxon, they will be represented as well, but they also declined to comment. But I'll tell you right now, these conversations are going to be about a few things for these CEOs, these big boys. They're going to talk about an unstable regime in Venezuela. Extremely unstable. They are very worried about who will be in charge in the long run. Will it be Delcy? Will it be Corina Machado? Will it be somebody else? How can we make a deal with a regime that very well could be out in a week or a month or a few weeks or whatever? How can we make a deal with that? That's one. Two, our government could change. Our policy could change. Our philosophy in the Western Hemisphere could change. Our involvement in Venezuela specifically could change. Our investments in Venezuela could change with a new president. All of this could change. That's risky. Also, Trump can talk about we won't need to strike all he wants, but that will not alleviate the fears of violence in Venezuela. You may have oppositional, guerrilla, anti-American forces right now loading their rifles, getting their provisions, planning their attacks right now. And probably is happening. Let's be honest. Probably is happening. There's no way Trump can guarantee that there won't be attacks on any oil encampments that U.S. companies set up. We told you that for about 100 years, Venezuela was very favorable to the U.S. in oil production. We were able to move Americans over there, build towns around their oil, set up these awesome encampments to really pump that oil. People spent their whole lives there, little American settlements around the oil. If we attempt something like that again, Trump absolutely cannot guarantee anyone's safety. Terrorist attack. Attempts by a regime to retake this stuff, kick them out. A government that does not want to be involved in Venezuelan politics, followed by an opposition force retaking the government and deciding these deals don't work for us, just like what happened with Chavez. Trump can't guarantee any of that. They know it. So they will squeeze his orange head. And they will see what kind of juice can come out. And whatever juice comes out of their squeeze, it will be paid for by us. It will be our money that subsidizes their efforts in Venezuela if Trump is successful. And Trump is facing other impediments to his administration's philosophy in Venezuela. Because now I'm going to get to the good news. There had been a previous resolution to curb the attacks on the boats. Failed. Then there was a resolution just a little bit ago to curb any future violence in Venezuela. It failed. Now, after Trump has unseated Maduro, they tried again. There was a bipartisan resolution that was led by Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat out of Virginia, and it was co-sponsored by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. It was also co-sponsored by Adam Schiff and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. This resolution its intention is to block Donald Trump from using military force within or against Venezuela unless he gets prior approval from Congress. That is what this resolution says. And it passed 52 to 47. 5 Republicans came across the aisle. This resolution passed, and it will go to a full vote in the Senate, which it is expected to pass. It is expected to pass. What did Tim Kaine say about this? Now, we're going to hear from these people. I am interested, and I'll tell you another thing. If these 5 Republicans want to come across the aisle on an issue like this in the face of President Trump's MAGA control over the Senate and the House, if they want to buck the president in this manner on this issue, I feel like I have the obligation to read what they have to say about it. You want to take this kind of stand against this administration, then you have earned the right for me to examine what you have to say about it. I stand by that. Tim Kaine, the Democrat who led the initiative, said, instead of responding to Americans' concerns about affordability, President Trump started a war with Venezuela that is profoundly disrespectful to the U.S. troops, deeply unpopular, suspiciously secretive, and likely corrupt. How is that American first? How is that America first? Trump's war is also clearly illegal because this military action was ordered without congressional authorization of the Congress. Congressional authorization that, the Constitution requires. How do I know it was a military operation? Because like I showed you on this show, Pete Hegseth sat there and told us this was the most successful military operation the world has ever seen, unquote, out of our Department of War's secretary's mouth. This was the most successful military operation the world has ever seen. It's what he said. Right after the administration told us it was a law enforcement action. That's what he said. All right, so this procedure will set up a vote in the Senate. It is expected to pass. It will then need House approval and a presidential signature, which makes this just a gesture. It's still good news. I'm just going to be honest with you. You know I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to spin the crap out of this and say this is actually going to meaningfully go anywhere. No, I'm going to be honest with you, like I always am. It will die in the House, and if it doesn't die in the House, the president will not be signing it. I promise you. So it's a message. It's a crack. It's a message. That's what it is. It's a crack in the foundation of MAGA Republicanism in Congress. That's what it is, and that is a good thing. Even if it doesn't pass, even if it gets shot down, even though it is definitely not going anywhere, ultimately, it is still a good thing. Tim Kaine said to my Senate colleagues, enough is enough. You were sent here to have courage and stand up for your constituents. That means no war without a debate and vote in Congress. Boom. Obviously, there's Republicans that are not happy about this. Like Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso out of Wyoming. Republican out of Wyoming. He urged his senators to reject the war powers measure, calling the U.S. military capture of Maduro a law enforcement operation once again. Awesome. Quote, it does not make America stronger. It makes America weaker and less safe. He's referring to the resolution. It would weaken the president's legitimate constitutional authority. This body, the United States Senate, is being asked whether the President of the United States has the authority to arrest indicted criminals. Of course he does. Well done, John Barrasso. Well done. Let's hear, rather, from the 5 Republican senators who voted with the Democrats. Let's hear from them. You've earned it. Susan Collins, Todd Young of Indiana, Josh Hawley of Missouri, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Let's quickly hear from them. Susan Collins. The circumstances have now changed. While I support the operation to seize Nicolas Maduro, which was extraordinary in its precision and complexity, I do not support committing additional U.S. forces or entering into any long-term military involvement in Venezuela or Greenland without specific congressional authorization. Boom. Although I don't love her little show of devotion to this administration when describing the Maduro capture. You don't have to fawn over Miller's little operation there while making a good point like that, but she did, and it's fine. She's trying to walk that tightrope, right? Todd Young of Indiana. Now, he is a conservative former Marine Corps intelligence officer and a Republican out of Indiana. He said, quote, President Trump campaigned against forever wars, and I strongly supported him in that position. A drawn-out campaign in Venezuela involving the American military, even if unintended, would be the opposite of President Trump's goal of ending foreign entanglement. So he throws his campaign promises back in his face. I'm here for it. Good tactic. You don't have to personally attack Trump. You can simply say what you're doing now is against what you promised. What you promised is why I supported you. And now you're doing the opposite of that. It's very simple, very concise, not too inflammatory, but also, I mean, his position is very clear on that. And I appreciate him coming across. Josh Hawley of Missouri. Now, Josh Hawley and Rand Paul, these next two, I'm going to tell you, these two guys, Josh Hawley and Rand Paul, I am convinced that they are situating themselves securely to primary Donald Trump. I am now convinced. Hawley, on some key issues, has spit in Trump's face, and Rand Paul, more and more increasingly, is willing to talk against the policy of this administration and make sense, which I think is dangerous in the case of Rand Paul, because Rand Paul generally is a degenerate. But because I think he has aspirations for the White House, he's willing to buck Trump on obvious moral issues, obvious issues of morality and constitutionality. He's willing to more and more increasingly to come out against Trump. And I think he's, again, positioning himself for a presidential run. I do. I think he's positioning himself, as is Josh Hawley, as an alternative to MAGA Republicanism. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, we know Josh Hawley and Rand Paul to be generally degenerates. We know that to be true. Their track record has proven that, has shown that to us. When they tell you who they are, believe them. That being said, is a possible mounting of a primary campaign against Donald Trump a good thing? Hell yeah, it is. As terrible as Rand Paul and Josh Hawley can be at times, are they a better alternative to a Trump administration? Hell yeah, they are. So I don't know if I hate that so much. And I see that is really what's playing out with Josh Hawley and Rand Paul. Hawley said that his vote was based on constitutional concerns about what could come after Mr. Maduro's ouster, including further military intervention in Venezuela. My guess, they don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela. And as far as boots on the ground, he thinks that's unlikely, which is great. That's terrific. But what I had to vote on today was, does Congress need to authorize future in-country military operations? And I think we probably will need to do that under Article 1. He's saying, look, flat out, you may not know what you're doing right now, Mr. Trump. You're trying to jockey for the best position possible for the U.S. But that being said, it is constitutionally obvious that you need to go through us. It's flat out what he's saying. Rand Paul, libertarian, long opposed to U.S. interventionism. Rand Paul, that's been a consistent position of this man. Quote, current congressional leaders squirm and would like to shift the burden of initiating the war to the president. That's an interesting take, calling his fellow Republican senators cowards and just allow Trump to, bear the burden of just unilaterally going to war with people. Right? If he steps over you, you don't have to worry about the optics of it because you don't have a say. And Rand Paul saying that's cowardly, you're squirming. It's your responsibility, not Trump's. Quote, less than courageous members of Congress fall all over themselves to avoid taking responsibility, to avoid the momentous vote of declaring war. That's exactly what he's saying. And Lisa Murkowski loves to say the right thing right before it comes to a vote, but this time she voted the right way. Now, let's see how she votes when it comes to the floor. Because Lisa is the queen of flip-flopping. She is the queen of it. She loves to say the right thing on the front end and vote with the bastards on the back end. That's her game. That's what she does. It's all she does. So she supports the resolution. She voted for the resolution. Now it goes to a full Senate vote. Let's see how Lisa votes. But for now, she's saying this. The administration failed to provide Congress with the information necessary to fully evaluate the legal basis for these escalating actions. That was true then, and it remains true today. Okay, you five, I gave you your say. Let's see how you vote. I do expect most of them to be consistent and vote for this war powers resolution when it hits the Senate floor. I expect most of them to do that. Lisa, I'm watching you, you little weasel. I'm watching you. And I just want to end with this. This isn't the only crack. This isn't the only crack. You see, Johnson can only lose 2 votes in the House. He can only lose 2 votes in the House on any one issue, and it is emboldening the Democrats. And Trumpian policy, it's just not holding like it did previously in the House. There are more and more Republicans that are willing to buck the president. More and more. How do I know that? The president tried to veto 2 acts just recently. He tried to veto 2 acts. The Arkansas Valley Conduit Act, which was a bill meant to aid a decades-old Colorado water project. Trump wanted to nix that because he's such a great guy. Nix the clean water project in Colorado because it's Colorado, nice and blue. Nix their projects, take their money away. Trump tried to veto that. Trump tried to veto that. 35 Republicans chose to override Trump's veto in that Colorado water project. 35 went against the president's wills, decree in that manner. Then there was Trump's veto of the Miccosukee, and I should know how to pronounce that right off the top of my head because the Miccosukee Casino is just down the road from me where I've lost money. The Miccosukee Reserve Area Amendments Act right here in Florida, which would codify tribal land. Trump wanted to veto that because he's such a great guy. And 25 Republicans went against him on that matter as well. And then there's the case of the ACA. Remember I told you, my wife asked me, she said, Brett, honestly, what chances do you give of the ACA subsidies as we are discussing our healthcare needs and our bills, our premiums, how we can get covered and what it's going to cost us? She asked me, she said, what do you think? Just a question. What do you think the chances of getting these subsidies extended are? And I said, if I'm being honest, 5%. Something like that is what my gut is telling me. Are the percentage chances that we get our subsidies? 5% is what I told her. I'm going to bump that up just a little right now. I'm going to bump it up just a little. You want another crack? You want another weakening of MAGA Republicanism, at least in the House? I told you about Hakeem Jeffries' discharge petition to force a vote on a 3-year extension of the ACA subsidies. It passed. Yep. 17 Republicans supported the measure. 17. Now, a few months ago, I might have then followed that with, but it'll die in the Senate. It's kind of how I felt about the Epstein discharge petition. And what happened there? Just unanimously through the Senate. Took about 2 seconds. Boom. Through. Massey and Khanna's discharge petition. They fought. They scraped together signatures. They got it. It passed with Republican support. On to the Senate, unanimously passed. And then Trump, feeling the pressure, boom, signed it. Months ago, I would have said that wasn't possible. So I'm not going to sit here and say now that it's not possible for a similar outcome with this ACA subsidies, with this measure. It may pass the Senate. It may. And then feeling the pressure and wanting a very easy and giant W with the American people in a midterm election year, Trump could sign it, especially considering his team and his administration have failed and floundered when trying to replace the ACA subsidies and this portion of easing the burden on the American people's lives in terms of their health care. His administration has failed and floundered for years trying to replace the ACA. They are still failing and they are still floundering. The American people are still feeling squeezed. Premiums are doubled. Could Trump sign something to extend the premiums, to extend the subsidies and make every American's lives a little easier? Well, not every, but like 30 million or whatever it is, 40 million. He absolutely could. I'm going to say he absolutely could now. He absolutely could. This could actually happen. And I'm going to leave you this. When we're talking about a trend, a broader trend of bucking the president, Chuck Schumer says it's obvious. He says this is a trend. Public sentiment in terms of how Trump is behaving as a president, what he's doing as a president, keeps sinking and sinking and sinking. And our Republican colleagues realize that. So I think on this issue and other issues, you're going to find our Republican colleagues saying, maybe following Trump is like following Thelma and Louise right over the cliff. That's what Schumer's saying. Of course, noted, degenerate, and loyal Trump foot soldier Tom Tillis will come out and say different. What does Tom Tillis have to say? This is the whimpering of a weakening Republican stalwart. He said the votes on Thursday, referring to the War Powers Act, should not be viewed as a part of any broader anti-Trump trend. Noting that the president has endorsed passing healthcare legislation. Oh, I'm sorry. He's talking about the ACA. Noting that he mentioned that the president has talked about passing healthcare legislation. He mentioned that. He said this is not part of an anti-Trump trend. It's not. This has more to do with the healthcare issue. And he continued, it may be that the House Republicans who voted with the Democrats broke with leadership, but I don't think they broke with President Trump. Tom, you think we're stupid. Everybody knows, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, everybody knows that Trump's will is the will of Republican leadership. Don't you try to sit here and tell me that voting with Democrats on any issue isn't an anti-Trump action. It's an anti-Republican leadership action. Trump is Republican leadership, period. We all know it. It's the point of all of this. Nice try, Tom. You got to try, right? You're just the jerk off to go off in front of a mic and say something like that. You are, Tom. Nice try. You did your job. We're not buying it. I'll see you next week. Thanks for staying with me.